I was out walking the fields this morning and I thought, oh my goodness, there's one thing that I need to talk about with you guys is foliages and how important they are. A lot of times we're just focused on the flowers, but today we're going to focus on the foliages that you need to be growing so that you can have plenty of product. Welcome to Learn Cut Flower Growing. Whether you are an inspiring green thumb, a busy mompreneur, or simply seeking a passion, you are in the right place. If I had to do it all over again, knowing what I know now, I would do it smarter. And that's what I'm sharing here. I want to take years off your learning and help you bloom with confidence in your garden. Each episode, I'll share practical tips and ideas, heartfelt stories, and expert insights to help you grow and find balance in your journey. I'm Paula Rice, your cut flower farmer guide. I've been growing for 16 years, and I'm an expert in my field, literally. So grab your gardening gloves and listen to me while you work, or grab a cup of coffee and relax as you learn to manage a cut flower garden and business. All right, here we go. The importance of foliage, I don't think dawned on me for quite some time. I was really focused on just growing flowers, making sure that I had flowers in every season. And what magically happened, I didn't even really know about the foliages enough, but what magically happened is that I had raspberries on my farm and they were thornless raspberries. So when I came to that moment of like, okay, well, shoot, the first year I just grew some asters and some snapdragons and some very basic, simple things. And I was like, what am I going to pair this with? And that's when I kind of hit the landscape and the ditches and the woods and started to experiment with, okay, what kind of foliages can I put with this so that this looks like an arrangement, that this looks like a bouquet? So I turned to my raspberry and I tested it, and holy smokes, it has like a forever vase life. It's amazing. And I, as you know, have 33 rows of raspberry right now. It became my number one foliage on the farm, and I would use it in the grocery store bouquets. But there's quite a few categories when it comes to foliages, okay? We have annual foliages, meaning you will seed them and they will grow and you will harvest them all in a single season. Then we have perennial foliages, which they just come back every year. Then we have foliages that are like shrub material. And the industry, at least what I'm used to, is they really call it just kind of woodies. I always say the woodies field. And what I mean is it's a permanent bush in my landscape or in my field. And then, of course, we just have sticks, things that we grow for just sticks. So let's briefly pop back up to the annual foliages. And I was always able to very successfully sell foliages even to the florist world. I don't know how much foliages is going to be in demand necessarily in my farm stand unless it was eucalyptus or something unique. It doesn't take very long for the locals to catch on to like, well, if Paula's harvesting that from the woods, I can probably harvest that too. And to be honest, when people are picking up do-it-yourself buckets, or I'm out on an event and it's outside and I run short of some type of a material, I absolutely look to the woods. I'm like, okay, what's out here that I can harvest and use? I also look to the woods just as a source of inspiration. It's like we kind of want to marry the design and the aesthetic to the area that it is in. All right, so let's talk about the annual foliages that are a really good one to grow. I have a list here. First of all, shoe fly is a really good annual one to grow. That's a common name for it. It's also can be called apple of Peru. Nicandra would be more of the Latin name that you could look under. I like Nicandra, but it does not like the cooler. It has a very good vase life. Okay. It has a sweet little delicate purple flower. And then what I really grow it for is this cute little pod that develops. It looks like a Chinese lantern, except it stays all green. And the foliage is really nice too. But when I harvest that, I cannot put it into the cooler. It's kind of like zinnias. I can put zinnias in the cooler for a little bit, but not very long. It's too cold for them. And so I will just keep that kind of out on the counter with a bucket for like 3 days and pull from it, or I go and get what I need every morning. So if you're selling that to a florist, you absolutely have to tell them, hey, you want to use this up? right away in your bouquets and don't put it in the cooler because it's going to turn brown. It doesn't like it. It's exactly kind of like basil. Basil can be, when it's mature enough and hardened enough, a few basils can be used as a foliage. Mostly I would use them for the seed pod, but you can get away with it. But again, it doesn't like the cooler, so it has to be used right away. Another foliage to use that's annual is sweet pea foliage. If you're looking for something in the vines, I guess that would really be more of a viney type of category, but I definitely pick it and would sell it. Like I grew enough sweet peas that I wasn't just harvesting the blossoms. And if I did harvest the blossom, I was tending to take foliage with it. So when I sold a bunch of peonies, it was peony blossoms with foliage. It was like this big wild bundle because I knew the florists would like that. And so I really like sweet pea foliage. And then geranium foliage is good. Not all the geraniums are awesome. You know, some of them just don't get lanky enough, don't get tall enough, but the ones that tend to kind of sprawl are a good candidate. And they tend to be the really scented type of geranium foliages that make good cut flowers. Buplerum is amazing. You have to be growing buplerum. Just remember, when you seed buplerum, it wants to sprout. It needs coolness and darkness. But buplerum is lovely. You are absolutely not growing it for the blossom. You won't even notice the blossom. But you do have to make sure it is mature enough before you harvest it. So you're going to make sure that you're seeing little seed pods develop. And the curious thing about buplerum is I use it a lot for dried arrangements and wreaths. We harvest it and dry it. But when it gets really mature, it actually will kind of start to lose its color. You literally can harvest it, not put it in water, and it just sits like that. It's really that good. But before that, you can't really do that. But it is awesome in the vase. Carthamus is another one. Safflower, I guess, is the common name of that one. And I have never been a fan of the blossom of Carthamus, mostly because I can't get to it fast enough. I feel like it just comes into blossom really fast, and then the bees get it. And most of the time I'm like, ooh, you're no good. Ooh, you're no good. But it has the pod, after it's bloomed, if you pluck off its little petals, the hair, okay, that's an interesting element that you could use. But I grew Carthamus and harvested it before it bloomed and used it as a foliage. And I thought it looked like a sweet little succulent. Now, they can be prickly. There is one, boy, it's not coming to my head, which is the least spiny of them. But that's when I grew it. And I would grow a lot of it. Direct seed it, and I would grow a lot of it because I loved, and I would pinch it. I would pinch it when it was growing so it would kind of branch out. And so I could kind of build a bouquet into it and have these little star type succulent looking things in it. So I loved that idea. Cosmos, believe it or not, the foliage works fine. You know, you might come in, you're like, I don't have anything. Well, march over to the cosmos plant that maybe isn't blooming yet, or you harvested the blossoms and get yourself some really ferny, fluffy type of foliage. It has a very different type of look. You can grow eucalyptus from seed. People weren't really doing this in the beginning when I was growing, but they're starting to do it now. And I've done it. Man, you got to start that seed really, really soon. And it has to go into my greenhouse where I live. And it doesn't come back for me. Not at all. So I do it, but it's not going to be this amazing, huge plant, you know. They're going to be a bunch of little plants. For me, so far, I feel like they'd be like 2 feet tall. And I order in plugs. I have tried growing them from seed too, and I think that would work. But you're starting them so early in your season. And then euphorbia, snow on the mountain. It has a white edge on it, and I really like it. It comes into the stage of harvest kind of later in the fall, and it is lovely. But it does emit a white sap when you cut it. And you do need to be careful with that one. Yeah, one time I had my neighbor in the field and she harvested and she kind of felt like maybe a bit got in her eye. And so I said, no, you need to go straight. And we started washing out her eye and stuff like that. And she was okay. Actually, she was okay. We got it fast enough and it was a dewy morning, so maybe it didn't affect her much. But basically, I try to be the one to harvest that, and I will wear gloves and I will put on glasses just so something doesn't go into my face. I've had people get reactions from that sap. And so I just warn people. I did get some in my eye once. This is how I know this so well. And it was kind of interesting because I actually lost a layer of skin around my eye and face for some weird reason. Yeah, there's a problem. It's got a problem. It's kind of painful, all that jazz, but beautiful, worth it. And you can make your own decisions about that one. Okay, then we would move in. So we talked about some annual foliages, and now we're going to talk about perennial foliages. I want to bring up raspberries into this category. Raspberries are actually more in the woody category, the shrub category. But I remember visiting with a grower, and he lived in an area where he's like, yeah, I want to do some raspberry, but I don't want to manage raspberry harvesting at all. And he came up with a brilliant idea to me. He's like, you know what? I'm just going to mow them down. And I thought about that for a minute, and I'm like, you could literally mow that down every fall or every spring, because really what you could harvest is just the new growth. So when you have raspberries, you have, my raspberries fruit on second year growth. So you would be just mowing it down every year. And then new stuff would come up, and you would harvest from that, and it would branch, and it would do what it's always going to do, trying to have berries the second year. But then you mow it down, and it really never gets that chance. So I've never talked to him about how that all went, but in my mind, I'm like, yeah, that could work if you didn't want to manage a berry patch. But let me say that when I come back in the spring, my second year growth on the raspberry foliage really isn't ready for me until like maybe the beginning of July, the middle of July. And so if I need foliages, I don't mind taking the second year growth and using it. It's a little bit woodier, but because I'm used to picking shrubbery and using shrubbery, that doesn't bother me at all. So you can play the game any way you want. Other perennial foliages, of course, are your herbs, like your sage, your rosemary, your mint, your oregano. And mountain mint, by the way, is an amazing one. Picantha, mountain mint is stellar. I really have a hard time with it here. I'm not sure why, but that I would say if there should be a cut flower foliage of the year, it would be mountain mint. It's got a stiff stem. It'll blow your mind. I mean, don't think of it like traditional mints. It's a little bit different, but it's way cool. Baptisia. So you're growing this Baptisia and you're using the flower, but the foliage is fantastic. Also, so that would be, you get to use that 2 times. Like you totally get to sell the crop of the flowers, and then you totally get to come back and sell the Baptisia. And towards the end of the season, I just take the whole plant. I'm like, okay, it could frost any day here. So I'm going to take the whole plant and get it sold, at least back in my old world. I would just be like, okay, yeah, cut the whole thing, because it could freeze tonight. And that's exactly what you cutting all of it is it feeling like it got frosted. Peony is, you can use the foliage on peonies. That works really great. For me, at a certain point, I can't. I get this little bug, sawtooth type of bug, and it nibbles on the edges of the leaves in the nights. And so eventually, I mean, even though it is kind of looking like it's scalloped, it's bug eaten, and I can't use it. And also you can get powdery mildew and other things into your peonies as the season progresses, and maybe the foliage wouldn't be great, but for a time it is. Hostas. Of course, you can use hosta foliage, the leaves of hostas. Iris foliage for people that like kind of more funky, not traditional designs, but more modern type design. I would cut iris leaves and sell them, especially the Siberian irises. I feel like they're really long and flamboyant, and they're really great. But I would cut both. I would cut the German bearded irises and the Siberica irises, if I'm saying that right, and use it. And it works great. Filipendula. This is thinking a little bit out of the box, but meadowsweet. Filipendula is the Latin for that. And it's kind of a ferny foliage that stays really low. You're not getting stem length or anything like that. But if you are doing boutonnieres, if you are looking for something a little ferny to go on a plate, you can harvest those and sell them in a bundle. And that's really pretty. Another option very similar in that case would be yarrow. The yarrow foliage is very ferny. You're not using it as something tall, but for small little elements and side adornments, it looks great and it works great. Okay, so the woody foliages, we've talked about the raspberries, how they are just awesome. And then all of the viburnums, like I have a very extensive woodies field, and I would say many, many, many woody plants work very well. What you are ultimately looking, and what makes one particular shrub superior to others in the cut flower world, is that it, number one, blooms. Okay, so if you got something that blooms and is a cut flower, that's amazing because you're going to come through on your row and you're going to harvest blossoms. Actually, 2 stages of the blossom. I like to come in on the woodies where the blossom is, I call it berried. It's a berried look, B-E-R-R-I-E-D, because, and they haven't bloomed yet, but that's really pretty. So I will try to get a decent harvest in that stage. And then as they just start to bloom, I will harvest in that stage as well, because of course, at that point, it is meant to be a blossom in the arrangement. And then for the next phase of the season, it's a berry. Like if they're blooming, chances are it's going to put on some type of a berry. And then you have a berry to cut and sell. And then of course you have the foliage itself to cut and sell. So that makes to me a shrub that has all of those characteristics and provides you all of those different windows to harvest from it and sell it throughout the season is superior. That is a superior woody cut shrub. So lots of things. Aronia is a very good one that works for me up here. Oh my goodness, that meets all of those criterias. All of the viburnums are pretty good. There is one viburnum that is kind of stinky when it blooms. It's not coming to my brain, but I can use the foliage and I will use it in the berry stage, the pre-bloom berry stage, far enough in advance that it's not going to bloom for them and have a stink. And then, of course, the berries and the foliages. 9-bark, all of them. So far, everything I've experimented with on the 9-bark, which is the physocarpus, it is very good, whether it's golden nugget, Diablo, the regular. And they're all very different in their growth habits. Some is just, yeah, I like the 9-barks. They're pretty much all good. Spireas are great. Bridal wreath is amazing. And then I'm constantly experimenting with other things. I don't think like rhododendron would be an amazing one. I think it lasts as a cut, but it isn't prolific enough to really grow and reproduce, at least not where I live. Maybe if someone lives more in the south, they would do that. But I would never hack on a rhododendron too much because I feel like that's such a slow growing type of shrub. I like something that's pretty aggressive. Like you cut it, it sends up more shoots and you can keep going with it. We do have some trees out there as well. Beech tree is a very good foliage. The trees get kind of huge though. I kind of look at them and I haven't really figured out exactly how I'm going to like cut that or coppice that and if it would even like that very much. But the leaves, you only need one of these. Oh my goodness. The leaves will hold out of water. So it really is good to have in your landscape because then you can, and the leaves are kind of small. You can use it in boutonnieres and things like that. And it can completely stay out of water. And it is really, really pretty. And I have a maroon one that has maroon leaves. And then I have one that has green leaves. And it is so, so pretty. All right, let me look here. Spirea. Love the spirea, the bridal wreath. I mean, you got to make sure that you have that all of the time. I never have enough of that, but the blossom is great. And then, of course, the foliage, how it just is arching is really nice. And then, of course, there's other spireas. And I imagine everything that I've tested is a very good cut flower. And even the hydrangea foliage will hydrate and hold. The ones that I have, the paniculatas and stuff, but I don't depend on them very much. Even, let's see here, ilex, I could harvest that foliage, but I usually don't do that. I just kind of let that grow for the season so that I can have berries at the end of the season. Oh, like Philadelphus, the mock oranges and stuff like that. I feel like the blossoms of those are pretty touchy. It's so crazy gorgeous and they are considered a cut, but wow, they can be really testy and go down. And then you can get some that last a long time. Rosa rubrifolia is a beautiful foliage. Red leaf rose would be the common name. I do not have that here. I keep finding that. A lady told me about it and gave me some testing of it, and I loved it. And so I keep telling myself, I gotta go buy that plant. I really want to have that plant, at least one sitting here on my farm so that I could use it. Now, there are foliages that are total crap. Like lilac foliage, that lilac is one of the things that do not have the 3 awesome characters about it at all, because all you do is get the bloom. You're harvesting it for the bloom, and that is it. Lilac foliage is no good. In fact, when you go to put lilac in an arrangement, you pretty much want to strip that foliage. It'll get really wilty looking. And then salix, curly willows, or excuse me, willows. Willows are not great foliages at all, but they are more for sticks. Okay. And that takes us to our last category is what do you grow for, you would have woody material that is grown just mostly for the sticks, which is the curly willow, the flame willows, the bending kind of willows. I have a ton of willows and curly willow. And this year we just, this is our transition year and I didn't have a market for it and didn't get to them. And we made my family, my kids, they made some amazing trellises out of all of the willow sticks that we had. I thought, oh my gosh, this is such a great idea. I really should just let a few of my bushes always kind of get bigger, maybe like 3-year growth or 2nd-year growth, and then harvest it just for making arbors and trellises and things like that. That was really fun. And then, did I say red twig dogwood is another good one? And red twig dogwood, you can harvest the foliage, you can harvest the blossoms too, and you can harvest the sticks. So that one gets to be up there too. One foliage is total junk is elderberry, sambucus. Total junk. I have a whole row of it and one's even a variegated, and every stage of it just won't hydrate and hold. I've tried everything. Maybe you've got some success in a trick you can tell me, but I've tried everything and I can't get that to go. And I'm like, man. So basically it just feeds the birds for me here. And that'll get your wheels turning on what you can be growing to have foliages on your little flower farm. They are great for florists. They are great fillers. They are great just as the greenery all the way around. I highly recommend the ones that I have talked to you about today, but there has got to be so much more. It just takes you cutting something, putting it in a vase of water and testing it. Like up here in the Northwest, huckleberry out in the wild is a great foliage. There is lots of things in the woods. The ferns, you might live in an area where the ferns are amazing. The fern that lives in my area, you have to wait towards the end of the season before it is mature enough to harvest, and so that it will hydrate and hold. In the early part, it just won't do it. It goes down right away. But that's just dealing with the stages of it. Snowball viburnum is really great for the blossom. This year I had I have a huge row of that, and boy, howdy, it got aphids like you would not believe. To look at an entire row and not be able to sell any of it, I was way too nervous. So next year, and that's the first year it's happened to me. So next year it's like, I think I'll get out there a lot earlier and do some preemptive contact spray, so that is not a problem. So when you're thinking about flowers, be thinking about foliages. Make sure they're part of your regime in your flower farm or in your garden. If you're planting them in your garden and you have a small garden, just plant them along the edges, because the perennials and the woodies will come back every year, or at least incorporate them into your landscape so that you can harvest on them as you go. And you will learn as you go how to manage them. Okay. But boy, I feel like they're so important, especially like in peony season. You don't have your annual foliages yet, and not a whole lot is pushing. So your woody material becomes pretty important to have. What other thing was I going to tell you? It seemed important to hold on. You know how I was telling you, like, curly willow, those foliages are not good cut foliages at all. But in the spring, when they are coming out, and they're pushing, you can tend to get away with it a little bit because they're pushing from the inside of the plant out, and they're just going to do that, whether, they're just going to do that, hell or high water. So you can kind of get away with that, but don't let that fool you, because later on in the year, it might be a little bit trickier. Okay, that wraps up all of the goodness on foliages in your cut flower farm. You guys, please like this podcast, download this podcast, and most importantly, subscribe, because then it tells the algorithm, hey, there's some people out there that want to be cut flower growers, and they will help Paula Rice get the word out there. Thank you so much for listening. Get out those catalogs and start looking at things that you can try to grow, and start testing right now. Go to your neighbors' yards everywhere and say, excuse me, can I take a branch of that and put it in a vase of water and see if that will hydrate and hold? You guys, it's so important. Have a great week. God bless. I'm thinking of you always and praying for the fertility of your land and the strength of you. All right. Bye.